Hello and welcome to our special one-off episode called Don't Panic. Now, there's a rumour going around that the VAT threshold could be reduced from £90,000 to £30,000. Naturally, this is going to get business owners, including yourself or bookkeepers, worried about what this could actually mean for you. Now, before you panic, this is exactly what we're going to talk about today. I'm delighted to be joined by Les Howard, a VAT specialist, who's going to talk about whether this rumour has any merit whatsoever and what this could mean for all businesses that are pulled into VAT for the very first time. So, Les, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Claire. Great to be here. Those of you of a certain generation will remember that The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was more popular than the Encyclopedia Galactica. And one of the reasons was that on its cover, it had large, friendly words, "Don't panic."
It's already supplanted the Encyclopedia Galactica as the standard repository of all knowledge and wisdom for two important reasons. First, it's slightly cheaper, and second, it has the words "Don't Panic" printed in large, friendly letters on its cover.
And hence the title of our episode today. Now, there's lots of chatter, as Claire said, about the VAT registration threshold being reduced from 90,000 to 30,000. Now, we don't know for sure, but it's good to be prepared just in case. And obviously that's going to affect lots of small businesses and other organisations, perhaps even charities. Now, really, this isn't the place to talk about the pros and cons of the political decision behind that. What we want to do is try and prepare you as a business owner or a bookkeeper or other advisor. What do you need to do? What do you need to advise your clients to do? And the first message and the last message from us is,
don't panic, don't panic, don't panic, don't panic.
So the impact on your business or your client's business will depend on a number of factors. For instance, are you selling goods or selling services? And if you're selling goods, are you selling new goods or second-hand goods? The second factor to take into account is whether you are B2B or B2C. So are your customers businesses or private people? And that will make a significant difference to your decision making. The next factor is whether your customers are UK based or not UK based, and in fact, whether your suppliers are UK based or non-UK based. And then finally, you need to take into account whether your suppliers are standard rated, reduced rated, zero rated, or exempt. So there's a lot of questions for you to think through before you make the final decision what you're going to do in your business. So at this stage, please don't panic, and we'll try and walk you through at least some of these options. One general piece of advice, assuming the registration threshold will reduce from 90,000 to 30,000, is it might be your opportunity just to review what you do. If you're doing too many different things, why don't you focus on what's most profitable, what you enjoy most, what's most effective for your business, and perhaps stop some of the peripheral activities that you might have got involved in. So let's look at one or two specifics. What will be the impact of a reduced VAT registration threshold on your purchases? Now, if you're buying from UK VAT registered suppliers, you will be able to reclaim VAT, which obviously you couldn't when you were not registered. So you're in a positive position there. If you're buying from non-registered suppliers, of course, there's no difference. So, for instance, if you're buying second-hand goods, that will not affect your purchases. If you're buying from outside the UK, you'll need to find out about the VAT reverse charge. Again, that won't have applied before you were registered, but once you are registered, you need to check the rules on that and make sure you account for VAT in the correct way. Turning to your sales, and this is probably the most important set of questions to ask. If you're selling to UK VAT registered persons, you're in an ideal position. You simply add VAT, and let's assume it's at 20%. They can recover it. and you're in a good position. If you sell to UK private persons, then VAT will be included in the price that you charge. Now, there's no obligation to show VAT as a separate amount on your website or other promotional material, and you can issue invoices that are VAT inclusive. That's absolutely fine, and that may be better for you. There's a separate question of whether you should increase prices, let's say by 20%, whether you should absorb the VAT in your prices and perhaps just increase them by 5 to 10%. That's where you'll need to take some advice and crunch some numbers. Obviously, you need to be still making profit. And finally, if you're selling to people outside the UK, perhaps through your website, perhaps through one of the marketplace channels, your supplies will actually be zero rated as exports, and you'll need to check the conditions for zero rating because there are specific conditions on that. And watch for the episode later which deals with those zero rate conditions for exports. We're now just going to look at a couple of simple worked examples so that you can start to work out the effect on your business should the registration threshold reduce from 90,000 to 30,000. So suppose you run a small shop. So you're buying goods from a wholesaler in the UK and they'll charge you VAT, and you're selling to private people. You might sell through a physical shop, you might sell through a website. Now let's suppose you've got sample purchases of £1,000 plus VAT. The sale value of those, let's say, is £1,500. So if you're not registered for VAT, your profit is £300. Now, once you're registered, you can recover the VAT that you've been charged. So there's VAT on £1,000 is £200, and we call that input tax, and you can reclaim that on your VAT returns. Now, your sales of £1,500, if we assume they're VAT inclusive, the output tax there is £250. So your net sales are £1,250. So that leaves you with a profit of £250. And that's assuming you've absorbed that into your price. Now, of course, you could increase your prices slightly so you can increase your margins to be what they were before. So the second example is if you're a service business. Let's suppose you work from home. Perhaps you're a professional or a creative person. You're likely to have very little input tax to reclaim. So we're going to ignore that for the purposes of this calculation. So suppose you've got sales of £1,500 when you were not registered for VAT. Now, when you become registered, you have a choice then whether to add VAT to that or absorb VAT. Now, you would add VAT if your customers are VAT registered. They can recover that on their VAT returns, so you're in exactly the same position. Now, if your customers are private people, this is where you've got to think quite carefully, because you could absorb the VAT, which would be £250. So your net sales are reduced from £1,500 to £1,250, so a loss of £250. What you could do is have a modest price increase. So for instance, if you were to increase your prices by 10% from £1,500 to £1,650, you then absorb the VAT of £275 and your net income is £1,375. So you're a little worse off. But whichever case, whichever type of business, you need to be crunching the numbers, take a bit of advice, start to plan. Are you going to absorb VAT? Are you going to charge it extra? And why don't you write to your clients? Tell them what's coming so it's not a nasty surprise when they get their first invoice with VAT on. Perhaps a little sales offer to increase prices, perhaps get them to recommend their colleagues, their friends. That's a good opportunity to do that. There are a number of special VAT schemes. They're not necessarily onerous, especially for small businesses, but they may provide some savings in terms of cost and admin. So it's worth finding out about these. Now, I'm going to briefly flag these schemes. We will put more episodes together in the future to explain the schemes in a bit more detail. So the first one is cash accounting. Probably this is the most likely that will be helpful for you. And basically, you only declare VAT when you get paid, and you only claim VAT when you pay your suppliers. So for most businesses, the cash accounting scheme is worth doing. You don't have to notify HMRC. You usually just tick a box on your accounting software and away you go. The second special scheme is the flat rate scheme, or the FRS, and it's very popular among small businesses. It simply means that when you prepare your VAT return, you use a fixed percentage of your gross income, which is treated as your VAT. And then there's no input tax for that return. That is much simpler. You've got a single calculation when you do your VAT return. So it's a scheme designed to reduce admin. It may be simply, since we use accounting software and we use apps now, that the flat rate scheme will become less popular, but it's certainly worth considering. The third scheme to look at, if you're selling second-hand goods, is the second-hand margin scheme. This is important because using the scheme, you only pay VAT based on the profit margin on those goods rather than the gross value of the goods. So that's a substantial VAT saving. Now, you are required to keep special records, and when we do the second-hand scheme in another episode, we'll explain that further. Now, whichever of the schemes you decide to use, or you may not need to use any of those schemes, do be aware that there's accounting software and apps which are readily available, and it's a good opportunity to make sure you've got the best software for your business, a software that will incorporate VAT, help you do accurate VAT returns, as well as deal with your tax and your tax returns. So we're just going to think briefly about the sort of options you might think about, especially the difference between those free of charge apps and those which are priced. It may be in your interest to spend a little bit of money on a good app. So over to you again, Claire, to just give us some pointers as to the best way or the best software that you could use.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so there is a range of available software, and if you go to gov.uk and search for HMRC approved software for MTD VAT returns, you will be able to see a whole list of software that's available to be able to file VAT. Now, saying that, there is a free agent software app which is currently subsidised if you hold a NatWest or Metal account, which means that you get it for free. Currently, that's free. Okay, there are companies such as Sage, Xero, or QuickBooks which have tiers of subscriptions for small business, for larger business, and for enterprise businesses. Now, to register for VAT, you may have to go up from the small business into the intermediate subscription to be able to get the VAT options. That is, unless software companies start to change and maybe perhaps include the small business owner into the VAT schemes as well. Okay, one thing I will say is don't go for the first one you see. Don't go for the cheapest option you see out there. It may come to bite you back in the backside later on. What I will say is to take some advice from your bookkeeper or accountant, shop around, get a demo, find out what suits you, what you understand, get some training, or again, just take some advice in general. Costs. Now, costs can be reclaimed on your tax return if it's wholly and exclusively for the purpose of business. You can also reclaim the VAT with a VAT receipt, so please make sure you keep it. So there's another question that will come up is how will this impact small businesses, and do you think that behaviour will change? For example, Will companies try and keep costs to under 29.5k? Les?
Yeah, it's actually a big question. For years, businesses have kept their turnover below the VAT registration threshold. The Treasury calls it bunching. And there's lots of small businesses whose turnover has been just below the threshold, really, for many years. I think it's much harder if you're running a business of any scale to keep that below 30,000. So you may be better to say, right, we're stuck with 30,000, let's go for it and let's build a much bigger and more substantial business.
So again, will small businesses have to account for VAT overnight, or will there be a phased introduction?
I'd like to think that there'll be a short period of introduction. There's a big change if from the midnight after the budget, the threshold were to drop from 60,000 to 30,000. My gut feeling is that the Chancellor would go for 1st of January 2026. So that will give us 5 weeks, even though it's over Christmas, 5 weeks of time to get prepared. So a 5-week introduction period. So that's what I'm assuming in my head. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, we can all breathe a sigh of relief.
How will smaller one-man band businesses find the time to do their admin, and what extra expenses are they likely to incur?
I think the use of software and apps is key, because if a small business already running then becomes registered for VAT, they actually don't need to do a lot more work day to day. The systems are already in place. They just tick a VAT flag in the software. They should be using or will be using Making Tax Digital or MTD in any case. So hopefully the additional administration will be fairly minor.
So that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Next up will be our introduction to VAT, where we'll be introducing the very first in the series of our VAT mini bite-size episodes. We really hope you'll be able to join us then. Thank you very much.